Let's talk about Carmelo Anthony, because there have been a lot of rumors about him joining the Houston Rockets, and he's openly stated that there's two teams he'd be willing to play for: the Cleveland Cavaliers and the Houston Rockets. Now, I think in my opinion the reason is Melo is such good friends with LeBron that he almost has to say he'd love to play in Cleveland. And then Houston, I mean, he's great friends with Chris Paul, but if they can land Melo, they've got Chris Paul, James Harden and Carmelo Anthony, and the Houston Rockets are looking really good going to next season. But they actually have to land Carmelo Anthony first, and there has been a lot of speculation about Melo going to the Houston Rockets. A lot of teams have been trying to go after Melo and trying to see if he'd love to play for their team, but he has a no trade clause pretty much. He decides where he wants to play next season if a deal can actually go down. But there has been a lot of speculation about the Houston Rockets because it's really hard for those two teams to make a deal, New York and Houston. There almost has to be a third team involved, and this is pretty much because of Ryan Anderson. Ryan Anderson, if you didn't know, the Houston Rockets paid him a lot to get him I think it was in last year's free agency, or maybe the year before. I think it was last year's actually. Last year's free agency. Well, New York simply wants no part of Ryan Anderson and the 3-year, $61 million contract left on his deal. Like, $61 million for 3 years. I don't really know what Houston was thinking when they signed him there. I mean, I guess they really wanted to stretch big, but Ryan Anderson and $61 million, that's a lot of money. So, I don't think that Ryan Anderson will stay in Houston, and there is no way he'll stay in Houston if Melo is to go to Houston. So there has to be a third team involved if they want to make a trade, and I think there's only a couple teams where Ryan Anderson could go. Pretty much any team that has a lot of cap space and wants a solid player. If you're the Brooklyn Nets, I'd go after Ryan Anderson, try and just hop in the trend and get him, but there's not many teams, but there are a few with a lot of cap space that could get him. The only thing is, it'd be fine if he was on a 1-year contract, but 3-year contract, that's the issue right there. And then obviously the amount of money left, that's really annoying, $61 million, but the 3-year contract really kills it for most teams, especially if you're the Houston Rockets who want to try and get Carmelo Anthony, who's openly stated he wants to play in Houston with Chris Paul and James Harden. Now, the trade talk of Carmelo actually going to Houston has died down a little bit since the new general manager of the New York Knicks has actually tried to retain Melo in New York. He's tried to convince him to stay in New York, which is why the trades have been put on hold for Carmelo Anthony. But let's be honest here, Melo, it's up to him, and the way that New York's treated him, I mean, if you watch some of their games last year, New York fans were booing Melo. I mean, let's say I'm Melo, I don't want to play for a team that boos me. Like, come on now. So, look, I know the Knicks are trying to get Melo and they're trying to retain him. They want him there. Well, the new general manager does, and obviously a few other players on the team. Kristaps wants him back. But let's be honest here, Melo, I don't really see him back in New York in a couple months. I just can't see it happening personally. But the thing is, Melo and Mike D'Antoni, which obviously, as you all know, is the coach of the Houston Rockets, they also don't have the best relationship, because remember, D'Antoni was the coach in New York, and Melo and D'Antoni didn't really get along, but I'm sure that Melo would be willing to put that aside and play in Houston if all goes well and he's available for a trade to go to Houston. And let's talk about what it means for Houston if they actually can get him, because I think that, I think they're going to be a really nice team. It's a bit annoying and it's a bit almost unfair for a lot of the Western Conference teams that they are in the West, because if they were in the East, I mean, I think they'd be in the finals for sure. Well, no, okay, maybe not, but Eastern Conference Finals, I think. If you had Chris Paul, James Harden, and Carmelo Anthony facing up against Kyrie, Kevin Love, and LeBron James, it would be a very tough Eastern Conference Finals, but obviously it's a bit unfair. The NBA kind of has to get rid of conferences. That's a whole nother video. I'm sure other NBA YouTubers will make a video on that, and if they don't, I'll jump on it. But look, I just think that Melo, Chris Paul, and James Harden in the Western Conference, that's the annoying part. But put aside the Western Conference, it's a really nice big three. Then you've got players like Clint Capella and a pretty decent bench. I mean, Eric Gordon, one of the best players to come off the bench, and he was really good last year for Houston. So there's also, I mean, they didn't re-sign, but they signed PJ Tucker, who a great defensive small forward to play off the bench as well. They retained Nene, who obviously Melo and Nene, if you guys watched Denver a couple years ago, Melo and Nene, they were a really nice 1-2 punch. So to be honest with you, they look really good, and I'm sure Nene's trying to recruit Melo to the Houston Rockets as well. So I mean, look, Melo to Houston, it's really good.
not to mention, I mean, they still got Trevor Ariza. They can run a nice squad against the Golden State Warriors. Let's say Golden State runs their so-called death lineup with Stephen Curry, Klay Thompson, Andre Iguodala, Draymond Green, and Kevin Durant. Well, the Houston Rockets would also be able to counter that with, I think, a really, really nice lineup with Chris Paul, James Harden. Then you can either, replace Trevor. I think Trevor Ariza can stay in that lineup, or PJ Tucker, one of the two. I think probably Trevor Ariza. Carmelo Anthony at the 4, and then Nene at the 5, or you can keep your 5 Clint Capella. It's really interesting. So I think that if you're Houston, if you can somehow get Melo, you're looking really good. The only thing that they'd have to give up, though, and this is where it gets a little bit interesting, I think they'd have to give up Ryan Anderson for sure. I think that's definitely, but they'd probably have to give up a few picks as well. Going back to what I was saying about, if Melo does join the Houston Rockets, let's talk about Chris Paul for a second, because when you think about Chris Paul, he is one of the best point guards of all time. But when you think about the guys that he's played with in the past, he really has never played with a good small forward. I mean, in LA, never really played with a good small forward. Played with some guys like Blake Griffin and DeAndre Jordan, and you can almost argue that he made them who they are today, especially DeAndre Jordan. I mean, obviously DeAndre is a great defensive guy, but you'll probably see this year, he might drop in offensive production. He may not, but that's just my opinion. He may drop in offensive production simply because he doesn't have Chris Paul giving him the assist, things like that. Blake Griffin, I think that's a different story, because Blake can kind of he sort of makes his own shots, and he gets to the hoop pretty easily, and he can use his post game a little bit better than when he first got into the league. But DeAndre, like I said, Chris Paul, I think, well, let's just say DeAndre's going to miss the assist by Chris Paul. But like I was saying, Chris Paul's never really played with a good small forward, so that will be really interesting to see if he can, I guess, mesh with a good small forward. And I guess with James Harden can also play at the small forward position as well, if they do run a small ball lineup and if they don't get Melo. So I guess it's a little bit more about Chris Paul in this situation, because I think that Chris Paul, he's played with some decent guys, but he's almost made them who they are. I mean, David West, when Chris Paul was in New Orleans, David West was a big man. Chris Paul played with him, and they were a nice, kind of 1-2 punch. Not really, but kind of. And then DeAndre, big man. Blake Griffin, big man. Tyson Chandler, big man. Those are some of the best players that Chris Paul has played it with. And obviously, there are players like, Jamal Crawford that he played with, but Jamal was kind of reaching the end of his career, more of a 6-man type of guy. JJ Redick, just a nice 3-point shooter. So Chris Paul's never really played with another star. I mean, if you count Blake Griffin a star, if you count DeAndre a star, I don't know about that. So for me, I think Chris Paul, he finally gets to play with, obviously, James Harden, a superstar, and if they can land Carmelo Anthony, another all-star player to go with that, I think the Houston Rockets will almost challenge in the Western Conference. And I think that personally, if they can get Melo, they'll be better than the San Antonio Spurs in my opinion, and probably challenge for the second seed in the Western Conference, or obviously up for debate, because there have been a lot of changes in the Western Conference. So let me know down below what you think about this situation. Do you think Carmelo Anthony will be traded to the Houston Rockets? Let me know down below. Like I said, there has to be a third team involved, so let me know who you think the third team will be. And I'll catch you guys in my next video. Please subscribe if you guys enjoy this video. I'm coming out with a lot of NBA content throughout the next couple of weeks. A lot of NBA stories, so stay tuned for that. And I'll catch you guys there. I'm out. Peace.